Shri Devam Narayanam Natma Sarvadosa Vivartitam Paripurnam Gurunshtam Vakshami Deshataha Samasta Guna Sampurnam Sarvadosha Vivartitam Narayanam Namaskritya Gita Tatparya Muchyate Gunagana Nilayam Patim Ramaya Jagadakadahanam Chavasavi Sunam Munikula Tilakam Supurna Bodhu Gurumapi Vivrunami Gita Bhashya Shri. Okay, so the plan for today is to do a quick recap of what we did last week, and then go to the first section of the part of the Gita Tatparya, which actually talks about the main message of the Tatparya of Gita, and then how is the Gita structured. And if possible, we will get into some examples of Gita Acharya's Vyakhyanas, or we will take them in the next session. So we talked about Acharya's works and the lineage of Acharya with multiple commentaries, starting from Shri Padmanabha up to sub-commentaries on Sri Jaitirtha's works, and then also the summary works like those of Sri Raghavendra Tirtha and others. And we also saw the background story of how the Gita Bhashya was written and what happened in Badri, where the Lord himself intervened to say that the word Shaktitaha may have to be changed to Leshataha as a kind of approval of Acharya's commentary, at the same time a recognition of his much higher potential, which may not be accessible to everyone. And we also talked about the significance of the Gita. Why is it so special? Why Acharya chose to write, in fact, 2 commentaries on the Gita, which necessarily required an understanding of how Mahabharata is placed in the larger corpus. Mahabharata having 2 important summary texts, one the Bhagavad Gita and the other Vishnu Sahasranama. So Shastreshu Bharatam Saram Tatra Nama Sahasrakam. So the Mahabharata is the most important work among the texts, and then within the Mahabharata are the Gita and Vishnu Sahasranama. And we talked about the Gautama Shapa and how do we understand the Vaktru, Shrotru and Prasanga Anukulya. So if a text is to be considered Pramana, of course, I mean, at a very fundamental epistemological level, I think you have already gone through those classes where the idea of Pramanya doesn't necessarily come from who composes it. I mean, when in the context of Vedas, in spite of no one actually composing it, there is an inherent validity in texts. So, but we talk about Apti or Pramanya more in the sense of dispelling the possible suspicion of why could this be considered valid. Why can't there be some confusions, some misleading statements, some ignorance-induced statements in this? So to avoid that question, we talk about the idea of Apti. And Apti having the 3 components, Vaktru, Shrotru and Prasakti. Who is the author and to whom was this text authored and in what context? And when those 3 make sense, then we believe that there is an Apti as the source of these texts, and we go to infer that these texts are indeed Pramana. So in that context, we talked about the Gautama Shapa as the context. So I briefly touched upon this, the first 2 sentences of the Gita Bhashya actually. So we'll go into a little more detail for 2 reasons. One, it provides of course, a detailed appreciation of how Acharya characterizes Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita within it. And the second is to appreciate the nature of Acharya's writings, and how each word can be understood to convey an important clarificatory message. And so we'll see three examples today. One are the first two sentences of the Gita Bhashya here, and then we will look at the Gita Tatparya, the introductory sentence, which actually summarizes what the Gita's message is. And we will see how Acharya is, as is popularly understood. I mean, his is very cryptic, but at the same time amenable to a deep analytics of what he is trying to convey. So his writings are short, but with heavily loaded in terms of the meanings in those sentences. So the first sentence in the Gita Bhashya after the Mangalacharana, Nashta Dharma Jnana Loka Kripalukhihi Brahmarudrendradvirarthitaha Jnana Pradarsanaya Bhagavan Vyasaha Avatatara. And we saw that last time. So there was, and this is important, I mean, Dharma and Jnana both are lost. And this is something of significance to differentiate, and we will talk about that a little more in detail later. The Bhagavad Gita is, and Mahabharata at large, is talking about these two aspects. One is Dharma and the other is Jnana. Jnana refers to, crudely speaking, Dharma refers to what we need to do, or the methods or the prescriptions of what's right and what's wrong. Whereas Jnana refers to the nature of Lord, the nature of universe, and the nature of the jivas. So in a way, one is about both are talking about the reality, but one is more at the sense of what is out there in terms of understanding the Lord, the Prakriti, and the jiva. And the second, that is Dharma, is trying to bring these three together in a way that what an individual actually needs to do to reach the destiny of moksha. So Dharma and Jnana, because in the context of Arjuna's problem, we can easily see that those are in fact the two primary questions. I mean, he's in a dilemma of what he needs to do and why. And why is that Jnana part, and what is that Dharma part? So Dharma and Jnana are both lost because of Gautama Shapa, and also due to the dilution with respect to time, Kalataha, because this is at the end of Dwapara Yuga. So by nature, there is a dilution, and on top of it is the Gautama Shapa. And because of that, the Devatas were compassionate and wanted to solve this on behalf of the people on the earth, for the Manushas. And so they went and requested the Lord to take an avatara, and that's how Lord Vedavyasa is born. After that, Tatascha. So here, if we carefully look at each words here, so Brahma Rudrendra Divirarthitaha, that is the one which is indicating the context. So it is not some, so it is referring to two aspects. One is Lord Vedavyasa came and wrote the Mahabharata in a context where the Devatas themselves were asking for it. So it is not a casual writing. And there is a popular verse that Shri Padmanabha quotes from Mahabharata. Na narmayuktam anrutam hinasti pranatyaye sarvadhanapahare nastrishu rajan na vivaha kale pranatyaye sarvadhanapahare panchanrutanyahu apatakani is a verse that identifies 5 instances where someone may be someone who is really intelligent and capable and is talking to another person who is also very capable and interested. But the context, and there are 5 different instances, 5 is just illustrative, but there may be many instances where because of the context, even though the Vaktru and Shrotru are very eligible, we are not getting the right message. And one of those is, for example, in a humorous context, or in the context of Pranatyaya. So there is a death threat. And so the way in which you respond do not necessarily reflect the factual reality. So you're saying something just to avoid that situation. Or in a situation of humor and someone is joking, then also obviously it won't necessarily be factual. So here the context is Brahma Rudrendra Devir Arthitaha. So they are those with highest eligibility are actually coming and asking for a solution, and therefore the context is set. Similarly, I mean, Bhagavan Vyasaha is talking about the Vaktranukulya and all of that. Tatascha, after that, the Lord actually composes Mahabharata Samhitam Achikravat. And why? So here the question is, okay, why should Mahabharata be an answer to Nashta Dharma Jnana? Because naturally it is talking about Dharma and Jnana. So in a context where Dharma and Jnana are lost, Mahabharata is addressing the problem of Dharma and Jnana. Then the question will be, okay, I mean, why should anybody be worried about Dharma and Jnana? I mean, they're not something that you seek out for. I mean, they're not Purushartha by themselves. I mean, nobody will be, no. I mean, the inherent the goal is not to understand Dharma and Jnana, but to be happy. So, ihakalu sukhameva mesya. So, Purushartha, or what you want to seek, is not Dharma and Jnana. And therefore, Acharya says, Ishta Anishta Prapti Parihara Sadhana Adarshana. So, Mahabharata was composed because people were not knowing the tools, the sadhana are the tools for what? Ishta Prapti and Anishta Parihara. Those are Purusharthas. So what we seek, Ishta Prapti and Anishta Parihara. So we want to remain happy forever and remove any hurdles or any unhappiness forever. So, and those are the Purusharthas. These Dharma and Jnana are tools to achieve that. And therefore, Ishta Prapti, Anishta Parihara, Sadhana Adarshana. So people were in a situation where they didn't know the tools to achieve that. Well, didn't you have the tools called the Vedas? So Acharya says, Vedartha Ajnanacha, for the reasons of Gautama Shapa. So people were not able to understand what the Vedas were telling. And because of these, Samsare Klishyamanana. This is again important. Samsare Klishyamananam, that is, people are troubled in this samsara, but being troubled is not their inherent nature. Because I mean, if we agree to that, then there is no justification to actually pursue something else. I mean, if one's nature itself is to be in this struggle forever, then there is no point in solving this struggle or going at the other end of this struggle. So Acharya says it is samsare klishyamanatva is because of Vedartha Jnana. So that is not by nature, but because there is this inability to understand the Vedas and follow the instructions, there is people are now in samsara. So, and therefore there is a need to write the Mahabharata. In addition, not everyone is eligible to study the Mahabharata. So Veda Anadhikarinam, Sri Shudradinam. So those who do not have the eligibility to directly study the Vedas textually. So that had to be summarized and interpreted or provided with illustrations, which is what the Mahabharata does. And therefore, there is a need for those, not only because of the inability to read the Vedas, but also because of the ineligibility to read the Vedas. So because of these two, the Mahabharata was composed. With what intention? Dharma Jnana Dvara Moksho Bhavet. So the idea was not to write about Dharma and Jnana themselves. Of course, Dharma and Jnana are documented, but Dharma and Jnana by themselves may not be, as I said, something that people want to seek, unless there is a more intrinsic Purushartha, like the moksha, which is achieved by this. So dharma jnana dwara, via the path of dharma and jnana, moksho bhavet. Iti kripaluhu. And kripalutva is again something interesting, because what is in it for him to write this? And therefore Acharya uses the word kripaluhu. The Lord doesn't get anything, but it is his kripalutva, his compassion or his intent to help the yogya samsari purushas because of that kripa. Upakaram kartumicha kripetyahur manishinaha is how Acharya defines kripa at some other place. The intent to help someone who is in distress. So with that intention, Lord Vedavyasa composed Mahabharata. And how is what is the status and the nature of Mahabharata, which we discussed last time, but I'm just trying to get that from the words of Acharya. Sarva Vedadyartha Upabrumhitam. It has the Vedartha embedded in it, not just a Vedartha, Vedadyartha. So it is also the Puranas, the essence of the Puranas that are also embedded in the Vedas, I mean, in the Mahabharata. Then the question would be, well, okay, it may be a summary text, but how does it become the text that you chose to actually comment on? I mean, you could have done this elaborate exercise of writing 2 commentaries, which you are doing probably for the Vedas. Why choose Mahabharata and that too the Bhagavad Gita? Because Acharya goes one step further to say, well, it is not just the Vedartha and Puranartha embedded in it, but something more than what is not even there in the Vedas and the Puranas, which is Tad Anukta Kevaleshwara Jnana Drishtartha Yuktam. So the Mahabharata has that which is not there in the Vedas, Tad Anukta. But then what is the source for that knowledge? It is the Kevala Ishvara Drishtartha Yukta. It is something which is known only to the Lord by his own jnana, and he has therefore and thus documented that in the Mahabharata, and those who are eligible will understand what's there, which is even beyond what's available in the Vedas. Well, if that is the case, then isn't it in a way defeating the very purpose for which it was written? I mean, you're talking about something in a context where people were unable to understand the Vedas, and there are people who are not eligible to study the Vedas, and you're composing something which is not only the summary, but has things that are even beyond the comprehension or beyond what is there in the Vedas. So it becomes even more complicated. So while trying to provide a simple solution, aren't you trying to complicate the matters? And therefore Acharya says, Sarva Praninam Avagahya Anavagahya Rupa. So the Mahabharata, yes, has everything in it, and even more, which is Kevala Ishvara Drishtartha Yukta, but the cleverness or the beauty in which Sri Vedavyasa has composed it is that it is accessible at least at 2 levels. I mean, there are multiple levels. I mean, we talked about the 3 meanings last time, and Acharya says Dashartha Sarva Bharate. There are a minimum of 10 layers of meanings for the Mahabharata, similar to how we say 100 meanings for Vishnu Sahasranama and 3 meanings for the Vedas. There are 10 meanings for the Mahabharata. But at a broad level, there are at least 2 levels of interpretations possible, which is Sarva Praninam Avagahya Anavagahya Rupa. One which is accessible to everyone, and one which is not accessible to almost anyone, but except say Brahma and the Chaturmukha Brahma and Rujus and those kinds of adhikaris. So Sarva Praninam Avagahya. Everyone can understand something, and no one can understand it fully, except really exceptional people. And then what is the primary message? Kevala Bhagavat Swarupa Param. The main message is to talk about the Lord, which should be accessible to everyone. Parokshartham, but is not the primary meaning is not, though is the primary meaning, is not directly said. In fact, we see more of those details when we talk about the context for the writing of Bhagavata, where the actual context is, well, you have already composed the Mahabharata, but because it is parokshartha, even though it has everything in it, and probably has more than any other text that can have it, the people are still not able to grasp the supremacy of the Lord in a direct way, and therefore please compose something in Samadhi Bhasha. And that's how Narada requests Vedavyasa, and that's how Bhagavata is born, where the supremacy of the Lord and all of these principles are told in a little more literal and a direct way, whereas in Mahabharata it is paroksha. And so such Mahabharata was composed. And within that, Tatracha Vasudeva Arjuna Samvada Rupam Sarva Bharatartha Sangraham. So within that, Sri Vedavyasa inserted the conversation that happened between Krishna and Arjuna in the form of Bhagavad Gita, which is Sarva Bharatartha Sangraha, which is a summary of the whole of the Mahabharata, like the nectar of the Parijata Vriksha or Parijata Pushpa. And that's the Bhagavad Gita. Any questions before we move to the Gita Tatparya description? I think there were some things in the chat, but for some reason I'm not able to open chat.
No, in the chat, he had just said that he was not able to see the screen.
Oh.
So that's okay.
But is that the issue even now?
No, we are all able to see. So
okay.
He rejoined. Yeah, he has rejoined.
Okay.
Mohan, you're okay now? Can you see the screen now? I guess, yes.
Okay, so any questions about how is the Gita and the Mahabharata are conceptualized before we move into so what is it that the Gita is actually telling?
For someone like me who doesn't know anything about these two, so what exactly is the difference, between these two works?
Bhashya and Tatparya?
Yes. Tatparya, I mean, if I understand, it is more like, he is giving the nirnaya, saying that, okay, this is what it should be, and this is what which, is the general misinterpretation. So is that correct, or how it is?
Yeah, mostly correct. I mean, literally speaking, I think I briefly mentioned it in the last session, but literally Bhashya is something that explains verses word by word, or provides meaning to specific words, meanings in a textual sense. Okay, what is how do you understand a specific word in a textual way? Not that the Bhashya actually discusses all verses or all words in chosen verses, but the commentary is with an intention to explain words. Though there are discussions about the concepts, but the major focus is to explain words. Whereas in Tatparya, the focus, I mean, the reason why I say the focus is that there is some overlap. You can see the conceptual and other discussions in the Bhashya, and also some bit of word by word explanations in Tatparya. But the main goal of these works in the Bhashya, it is the word by word or the textual interpretation, whereas in the Tatparya, it is talking about, okay, what is the meaning of these 3-4 verses taken together? What is the summary message of this chapter? So those kinds of discussions are more common in the Gita Tatparya. And also more of the Samakhya texts, which is using other works like the Pancharatra, the Purana, to support or elaborate on the main teachings of the Gita. That is done in Gita Tatparya more. So you see more citations, more quotations from different verses in Gita Tatparya. and also much more detailed discussions on concepts such as Vishesha, which is one of the very important concepts in Madhva Siddhanta. And each word is interpreted at a second level, which is, we talked about those multiple layers of meanings for the Gita and the Mahabharata. But for example, Sthavaranam Himalayah, in the Vibhuti Yoga, Krishna talks about, okay, where is the Vibhuti Rupa among different groups? Among the Pandavas, I am Dhananjaya. Among the Shankaras, I am Rudra. Among the rivers, I am Ganga, things like that. So in the Gita Bhashya, the first level meaning is provided, wherein, okay, there is this entity called, or a person called Dhananjaya or Janhavi or Shankara, Rudra, and they are the leaders or the prominent individuals in that group, because the Lord resides in them in a special form called the Vibhuti Rupa. And Gita Bhashya stops at that level. Whereas Gita Tatparya goes on to explain why is the Lord, Himalaya is not just having the form of Lord, but Himalaya as a word also refers to the Lord himself. So what is the meaning of the word Himalaya? Hri and Ma are the Lakshmi Rupas, and Alaya is like, Shri Dhara or Lakshmi Dhara kind of a word. So Himalaya actually refers to Lakshmi Alaya. And similarly, all of these, some 100 plus words that are used in the Gita, Aham Kratuhu, Aham Yajnaha, Aham Swadha, Aham Aushadham, all of these Krishna says. But at the Bhashya, we read them as, okay, Krishna is saying that I am Yajna because he is in the Yajna, and so he's saying that he has a special Sannidhana in Yajna. Whereas in Gita Tatparya, the word Yajna is interpreted as, okay, how is it talking about the greatness of the Lord? So that, much more detailed and a second level analysis is provided. The last point is, this can be an arguable statement, but I would say mostly correct, that Gita Tatparya is to be understood as the primary meaning. By primary meaning, I mean not necessarily the easily accessible meaning, but the more important meaning. Because there is a discussion in the second chapter, Nyaya Deepika, that is in Sri Jaitirtha's work, at least some 3-4 occasions where Gita Tatparya actually contradicts the meanings provided in Gita Bhashya. And there Sri Jaitirtha argues that the reason why you may apparently see that there is a contradiction is you're not supposed to understand the Gita Bhashya by relegating Gita Tatparya to the periphery, but only when you have understood the Gita Tatparya as the primary meaning, then even the direct meanings that were explained in Gita Bhashya make sense. But in the absence of this detailed and comprehensive review that's done in Gita Tatparya, it is possible to actually question the explanations provided by Gita Bhashya. So in a sense, these two texts are to be seen as one whole, wherein Gita Bhashya is providing a first level meaning, but they become completely legitimate only when we read Gita Tatparya and understand the deeper meanings for some of the verses, and thus the primary meanings. I don't know if I was able to clarify.
Yeah, I got you. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, and here is the very first part in Gita Tatparya, and this is the difference. I mean, the Gita Tatparya, there is a very important section at the very beginning before Acharya enters into commenting on each chapter or the verse, taking some specific verses. which is again, as I said, is in tune with the goal of Gita Tatparya, which is to talk about what is it that the Gita is actually telling. So even before entering a commentary in a more conventional sense, Acharya is providing, okay, this is the actual summary, and he provides some 50 plus verses, cites them to say, why am I saying that this is the summary? And then he goes on to explain some specific verses in detail. So the approach here is, I'll tell you what is to come, and then will justify why I said so. And here is the first section in Gita Tatparya. Tatra sakshad indravataram uttamadhikarinam atmanah priyatamam arjunam kshatriyanam visheshatopi paramadharmam narayanadvit tadanubandhi nigraham bandhusnehat adharmatvena ashankya tato nivritta prayam swavihita vrittya bhaktya bhagavadaradhanameva paramo dharmaha tadviruddha sarvopyadharmaha. Is the screen visible? I pressed something here.
Yes, yeah.
It is visible.
It is.
So you're on the same screen yet, right?
Yes.
Same
Gita
slide.
Tatparya in a nutshell. Yes.
Yeah, okay, fine. So bandhusnehat adharmatvena ashankya tato nivritta prayam swavihita vrittya bhaktya bhagavadaradhanameva paramo dharmaha tadviruddha sarvopya dharmaha bhagavadadhinatvat sarvasya iti bodhayati bhagavan narayana. So what is it that Lord Krishna, which is Lord Narayana in the form of Krishna, is actually teaching? So this is the summary of the main ideas embedded in the Gita. And Acharya gives some very important clarifications in this summary line. So Narayana Arjunam bodhayati. So Narayana is teaching Arjuna. What is the greatness of Krishna to be able to inform Arjuna? Is Bhagavan Narayana. So he has the ability and the knowledge to actually teach Arjuna. Atmanaha Priyatamam. Why is it that he's actually teaching him? Because he loves Arjuna. Atmanah Priyatamam. It is not for his personal benefits or gain, but because Arjuna is so dear to Krishna, and therefore he is teaching him. Well, why is Arjuna so dear? Uttamadhikarinam. Because he is Uttamadhikari. Well, what does Uttamadhikaritva mean? That is coming again from the Gita, where Krishna himself says, Jnani Priyatamoto me, or there are 4 types of people who come to me. Artho, Jignasur, Artharthi, Jnani cha Bharatarshabha. Jnani to Atmaiva me matam is how Krishna describes. There are 4 types of people. Artha, that is who is someone who is in distress. Jignasu, who wants to learn. Artharthi, who is in need of some material gain. And Jnani, one who already knows me or is coming to know, is coming to me for the pure love towards me. So I Udara Sarva Eva Ite. I mean, I respect all of them. And I reciprocate accordingly. But Jnani to Atma Eva me. The Jnani is of, I'm most the dearest of these. I'm the dearest among the 4. To me is the Jnani, and therefore Uttamadhikari. But how do you know that Arjuna is Uttamadhikari? Therefore, Acharya says Sakshat Indravataram. He is direct avatara of Indra. By Sakshat Avatara, the idea is to reject the possibility of understanding Arjuna as Avesha Avatar. Because we know that there are some incarnations where the Devatas or even the Lord may be having an Avesha. That is, that specific individual is someone else, but there is an additional presence of another jiva, another devata, or the Lord himself. For example, we know from the Balarama case where he is the avatar of Shesha, but the Lord has a special Sannidhana in the form of Shuklakesha avatar. Or Prithu Chakravarti is a Chakravarti, but the Lord is present in him in the Avesha of form. So they similarly, Devatas also have direct avatars and Avesha avatars. But in the case of Arjuna, it is the Sakshad avatara. And therefore, he is dear to me. Okay. But even then, why is it that you are teaching Arjuna? So Arjuna is considering something which is actually the dharma, but as adharma. He's understanding that as adharma, but in reality is the dharma, which is that Narayana Dvit tad anubandhi nigraham adharmatvena ashankya tato nivritta prayam. Arjuna is suspecting Narayana Dvit tad anubandhi nigraha. Nigraha is controlling or destroying people who are opposing Lord Narayana, or those who are allies to them. So the role of keeping them under check is a primary duty of Kshatriyas, in fact of everyone, and more so of Kshatriyas. And therefore Acharya says, Kshatriyanam Visheshatopi Paramadharmam. It is more so of a primary duty, it's a primary duty more so of the Kshatriyas. Which means that it is actually the duty of everyone else. But Arjuna is withdrawing from that important duty. Well, if Arjuna is actually doing that, then would it be because he actually has some justifiable reasons to do so? Therefore, Acharya says, no, bandhu snehat adharmatvena ashankya. So he is considering this important duty as adharma, not because of another justified scriptural reason or a pramanika reason, but because of bandhu sneha. So it is the emotional kind of a cover which is misleading him, and therefore is withdrawing from that dharma. Okay, if that is the case, then what is it that Krishna is supposed to teach? He has to say, well, Narayana Dvit tadanubandhi nigraha, that is to control people who are opposing the Lord or in alliance with those who are opposing the Lord. So that is your dharma, and you just do it. Why do you need to talk about so many other things in the Gita? And therefore Acharya says, well, he is teaching Paramadharma, and that Paramadharma is not just doing it. Swavihita vrittya bhaktya bhagavadaradhanameva paramo dharma. So swavihita vritti in itself is not paramadharma. So that is swavihita vritti means by swa we refer to the swavarnashrama dharma. So your specific individualized duties, swadharma, which is the running theme across Gita. So what a Kshatriya needs to do, what a Brahmana needs to do, what a Vaishya needs to do, what Shuddha needs to do, what Brahmachari should do, what Grihastha should do. So the ashrama related and Varna related, or you can go one step further to say what Purusha needs to do, what Stri needs to do, or what in a family, what the parents need to do, what children need to. I mean, all of these, the duties assigned to specific roles. So if you follow those duties, that is your Paramadharma. So Krishna would have stopped at that level. So Savihita Vrittihi Paramadharma. Acharya says, no, that is not Paramadharma in itself. You need two other components to it. One is Bhakti. So you do your duty, but with devotion to the Lord, with an intention of pleasing him. Bhagavad Aradhanameva Paramo Dharma. So Kshatriya taking part in war is of course Svavihita Vritti. That is Svavritti or Swadharma. But that is not Paramadharma in itself. Paramadharma requires two other components, and that's what Acharya is trying to say. Swavihita vrittya bhaktya bhagavad aradhanameva paramo dharma. So what is important here is for Arjuna, the required prescription is not Bhagavad Bhakti, because he has never moved away from Bhagavad Bhakti. He was only attempting to move away from the war. I mean, he never said that I won't worship the Lord, or I don't care to be the devotee of the Lord. So those were never his confusions. His confusion was only with respect to Swavritti. So for that purpose, it could have been that the Gita could have just focused on Swadharma. So for that, Sri Jaitirtha clarifies, and that's the reason why Acharya is clubbing these two together, is well, Arjuna is only the pretext. Arjuna is a, what we say in Kannada is nepa. But the whole intention is to teach the larger audience via the medium of Arjuna. And therefore, for those who are by nature eligible for pursuing this path, they have to be told that it is not just Swadharma, but it is Bhagavad Bhakti and Bhagavad Aradhana, all three taken together, which form Paramadharma. For Arjuna, there was no confusion with respect to Bhagavad Bhakti and Bhagavad Aradhana, but he had confusion with respect to Swadharma. But for the larger group, it was important to communicate all three. And therefore, Krishna in the Gita is prescribing this Paramadharma. I mean, conceptually or definitionally, also it is required to say that Paramadharma is not just Swavritti. So even if Arjuna had clarity, it was incumbent on Krishna to actually say that Swavritti plus Bhakti plus Bhagavad Aradhana forms, all these three together form Paramadharma. You are moving away from Swavritti. You have to do all these three to be able to be consider your activities as Paramadharma. Therefore, Krishna required to explain all three. In addition, because others may be even moving away from Bhagavad Bhakti, it was important to emphasize those. And that's what Acharya is doing here. So Vihita Vrittya, Bhaktya, Bhagavad Aradhanameva Paramo Dharmaha. In fact, I mean, this is one of the, kind of if there are some 10 most important lines, I mean, it's difficult to say so, but very, very important lines across the Sarvamula that one needs to choose. I mean, this will be one of the top 10 because Paramadharma, getting a succinct and an accurate definition of Paramadharma is something that most Vedantins or the Dharma Shastrajnas find it difficult to do. So Acharya is trying to provide that clear and focused definition of what is Dharma. Swavihita Vrittya, Bhaktya, Bhagavad Aradhanameva Paramo Dharma. It is, of course, easily interpretable if one reads the Gita carefully, but to actually distill this as the theme of the Gita is something extraordinary. Swavihita Vrittya, Bhaktya, Bhagavad Aradhanameva Paramo Dharma. Some question?
Namaste, Anna. Okay, I just want you to distinguish between Bhakti and Bhagavad Aradhana. I'm kind of...
At a crude level, we can say that Bhagavad Aradhana is the activity with an intent. Bhakti is the background emotion. So you're doing this act of war by... So in a way, Paramadharma is what is Bhagavad Aradhana. Pleasing the Lord or worshipping the Lord is dharma. That is the first level meaning. That Bhagavad Aradhana, it is the actual material activity, but you may not have the bhakti, which is the emotion behind it, to be considered a Paramadharma. So if we have bhakti and are choosing the right tools, which are swavritti, then taking these two together with an intent to please the Lord. Pleasing the Lord can be taken as a proxy for aradhana, I believe here. So that is the distinction.
So can we take it as Bhagavad Aradhana is action and
Yeah.
Bhakti emotion?
Yeah, I would think so. And also Bhagavad Aradhana can also be it can also embed the idea of why are you doing this? You're doing this to please the Lord. So Bhagavad Aradhana can also be seen as Bhagavad Prityartham Aradhana.
Okay. Bhagavad Aradhana is action plus emotion of bhakti.
No, but emotion of bhakti is you may have bhakti, but you may still do things not to please him, but to gain something. So that is still not nivritta dharma. Yeah, we will hopefully discuss the difference between pravritta dharma and nivritta dharma in the next class, which is again one of the key ideas of Gita that Acharya distills. So you may have bhakti which is not up to the level of nivritta dharma, which is I don't want anything else, but I want the Lord to be pleased. So that is in a way the idea behind the Bhagavad Aradhana.
Thank you.
And tad viruddhaha sarvopi adharma. I mean, this is again anything that contradicts this is adharma. So it's clear. This is dharma, and anything that is opposing this is adharma. Well, why should this be paramadharma? So Acharya uses one last phrase, Bhagavad adhinatvat sarvasya. Because the whole world is under the control of the Lord, Bhagavad adhina, and therefore doing anything as an act of worshipping him is the only thing that is logically consistent, because everything is under his control. So it doesn't make logical sense if you try to please someone who himself or herself is not fully under their control. So anything that is done has to be with an intention of pleasing the Supreme, and the whole world is in fact under the control of the Supreme. And this is the whole message of the Gita. Iti bodhayati Bhagavan Narayana. This is not Acharya saying, but Acharya is trying to paraphrase the teachings of from chapter 2 to chapter 18 of Krishna, as okay, this is the essence of what Krishna is trying to teach. What is dharma? What is adharma? And the reason why I say this as dharma is because everything is under my control, and that is Krishna's main goal in the Gita. And this again, I mean, Bhagavad adhinatvat, I mean, the beauty of linking these two is again something that we don't see in a lot of commentaries, and people mistake. Okay, what is the message of Gita? Okay, you do whatever, but do it with a sense of bhakti. And some say whatever is going to happen will happen. I don't know. I mean, these WhatsApp forwards of what Gita teaches probably tells everything that's not in the Gita. So you keep doing good for the society, and that is dharma. Of course, you need to do good for the society, but that's not where the Gita is aimed at. It is talking about Swadharma and Bhagavad Bhakti, and the relationship of prescribing Bhagavad Bhakti to the fact that the whole world is under the control of Lord. And only then we get a consistent, logically consistent kind of a narrative for the whole of Gita, because the second hexad from chapter 7 to chapter 11, a little bit of 12, and 13, 15, all of these are heavily talking about the supremacy of the Lord. If Krishna's intention was to make Arjuna just do the war. There was no need to talk about who the Lord is and who is controlling everything, etc. But because that prescription embeds the idea of Bhagavad Aradhana and Bhagavad Bhakti, it was necessary to talk about who the Lord is, therefore, by which you will get that Bhakti. Only when you know, in fact, Bhakti has been defined by Acharya. I mean, I guess you would have already seen that in Tatparya Nirnaya, Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya classes, where Mahatmya Jnana Purvastu Sudruda Sarvatodhikaha Sneho Bhakti Riti Prokha. Athava Jnana Purvaha Parasneha Bhakti. So Bhakti is a necessary component of Bhakti is Jnana. So you need to know the person to be able to love him, or to be his devout follower. And therefore, the Gita is talking about the supremacy of Lord. Otherwise, the whole idea of, he talks about Prakriti, he talks about, Mahabhuta, Panchabhuta, the relationship between Guna and Jiva, all of these do not seem to make a direct sense if we miss this link. All of the discussions on Prakriti are to, drive home the point that everything is under the control of Bhagavan, and therefore, whatever you do has to be with this intention of pleasing him and to worshipping him. But that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want, because Arjuna's initial kind of a dilemma itself was, well, let me go to forest and be an ascetic and things like that. So it doesn't provide the option for doing whatever you like, but what is prescribed. So this combination of the knowledge about the Lord and what needs to be done, and that's how it ties back to the point that we talked at the very beginning of this session, which is dharma and jnana, and that's how. I mean, this is a very intelligent way of summarizing what Gita is telling. It's on one hand is talking about dharma, on the other hand is talking about jnana, and that jnana is required to make complete sense of what dharma is, because dharma has bhakti as its component, and bhakti requires jnana. And that's how we circle back in understanding the goal of Mahabharata, the goal of Bhagavad Gita, and its messages, and how is it related to the war context, and how is it related to everyone else. If the prescription of war, I mean, that's again another interesting point. Acharya, when abstracting, is not trying to say that taking part in war is swadharma. I mean, obviously you need to abstract it to the level of so that it is generalizable beyond Arjuna. So doing war is not the dharma. Doing your swadharma is paramadharma. And in the case of Arjuna, it happens to be that swadharma is doing the war. So whatever is your swadharma, doing that with bhakti and as a form of Bhagavad Aradhana is paramadharma. And that's the message from Gita Tatparya. Hope we were clear. Any questions? Well, if you don't, sometimes not, hearing any questions is a little confusing. So
No, because it's clear.
so
Hopefully it is clear.
okay.
I just had a thing to say. If okay, I'll tell it later. It's okay.
No, that's okay. I mean, okay, whatever is comfortable. Okay, so in the next session we will talk. I mean, obviously it is. I mean, in 3-4 sessions, it's not possible to talk about the Bhashya and Tatparya in any more detail, but just the main ideas. So what I plan to do, hopefully over the next 1 or 2 sessions, the idea was to just introduce the main themes, So we'll talk about the idea of pravritta dharma, nivritta dharma, and how Acharya brings these together, especially when juxtaposed against the popular understanding, which I referred to in the last session, that some believe that the Upadesha of Gita is to the immature people, because Arjuna himself was immature, is how people characterize this. And in that context, this was important. And therefore, Acharya is saying, Tatra Sakshad Indravataram Uttamadhikarinam, he's at a much higher level than any of us. And therefore, it is not for immature, but it is actually for the real mature who are in pursuit of what is Paramadharma. And also, this is something that is the only way to respect the status of Gita. I mean, in the absence of this kind of an interpretation, but to reduce it to say that this is only for those who are not really mature enough. I mean, it fundamentally questions the significance of Gita itself. So why do we need to worry about this? And then it also raises more disturbing questions, which is, well, Arjuna was actually talking about something which is probably better for a mature person, and you actually pulled him back and do something which is of a second layer, and in a sense, okay, you do this first and then you become an ascetic. That at a fundamental level will not address what is Paramadharma. So with all of that juxtaposed, what Acharya is trying to summarize in this very simple sentence is very powerful. So over the next 1 or 2 sessions, we will try to look at the larger structure, which Acharya does by, in similar fashion, he actually provides 1-sentence summary of each chapter. So we will try to look at that. In both Gita Bhashya and Gita Tatparya, he does that. And depending on the time and interest levels at that stage, let's see if we can look at a few sample verses and how Acharya helps us to resolve some misinterpretations that were existing at that time, or apparent contradictions within the verse and the difficulty to interpret them at the on the face value. So we'll look at those examples.
Yeah, can I just add something?
Yeah, please.
That so here, I think we will be forced to look deeper into what is meant by swavritti, what is meant by bhakti, because even the understanding about these things could be flawed in multiple ways.
That's true. That is true. But unfortunately, I mean, Swadharma, Acharya also, I mean, Krishna himself describes in detail. And Acharya has provided much more details in Gita Tatparya, especially about the details of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra dharmas and all of that. But about bhakti, what we do get to know from Gita is the significance of bhakti. But what exactly is bhakti is not explicitly explained in the Gita.
But Acharya explains, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and also in Tatparya, Mahabharata Tatparya, there is much detailed, and also this popular confusion, and Acharya deals with that in detail in Gita Bhashya, which is in the Bhagavata. There is a story where Shishupala, after being killed by Krishna, actually enters Krishna's visible body. And Bhagavata talks about the idea called, you see, the Lord is so easy that you can reach him even by hating.
Correct. This is a very popular story that, because he's hating so much that he's all the time remembering Lord, and hence he gets moksha.
Correct. Dveshat chaidyadayon rupaha is how Bhagavata itself calls it. And I mean, Bhagavata actually provides one is kamat gopyaha. So by Kama, Gopika, Stris and others entered moksha. And by Dvesha, these guys, and some people with bhakti. So you have multiple paths. That's the message you get. And this had to be taken head on to understand what exactly is the Bhagavata is trying to say. So Acharya discusses that in the Gita Bhashya in detail, because there is one reference at the 9th chapter where, well, if you are my bhakta, anything goes. Apichet suduracharaha bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhureva samantavyaha samyak vyavasito hi saha. Even if he is involved in the most criminal of the activities or suduracharaha, but if he is my bhakta, then he has to be considered a good person. So these are the verses which really need a clarification and the understanding in the right spirit, and that's what Acharya does. So he goes on to explain that no, in the case of Shishupala also, what Bhagavata is saying is not that Dvesha also can lead to moksha, or that he is not saying here, Krishna is not telling here that anything goes for a bhakta. So those are not the interpretations, and it justifies why that kind of an apparent meaning is flawed. So those, yes. So in that sense, a discussion on bhakti is paramount.
There is a chat message, and after that, I'm ready to say what I wanted to say.
People made ahimsa paramo dharmaha very famous, rather chose only half of the line of the verse to do so, but rather the definition we saw today seems like a whole script. Yes, that's correct. I mean, what is important is Krishna talks about ahimsa in great detail. Ahimsa as an important dharma while talking about devasura sampatto. So what is the daivik, the right duties and the wrong duties? In fact, I mean this needs some explanation. Ahimsa. I mean, now there is the backlash saying, well, we misunderstood ahimsa. Ahimsa was never a dharma. That's also not true. But it is neither true that ahimsa only is paramadharma. I mean, as the message here says, the definition that we saw is the much more holistic one. In majority of the cases, or if we can say the default case, is that paramadharma would involve ahimsa as a part of it, would include ahimsa as a part of it. But in special cases, such as when there is a need to protect dharma and you have to actually engage in a war, then ahimsa doesn't become the fundamental defining property of paramadharma, but swadharma plus bhagavad bhakti, those become the primary criteria. Among the swadharma, there is this idea called, we'll discuss this later in detail, samanya dharma and vishesha dharma. So among the samanya dharmas, ahimsa is one of the samanya dharmas. By samanya dharma, I mean general rules that have to be taken as default principles to be followed, unless there is some special case. So war is not a prescription by default. So we know the sama, dana, bheda, danda. So danda is at a last stage. So here the prescription of asking Arjuna to take part in war should not be misunderstood as a rejection of the ahimsa principle. Ahimsa is surely one of the important principles, but that is not the defining feature of dharma, but it is the default feature which is applicable in majority of the cases. I think that kind of a nuance is something that's missing in the modern discourse.
Can I say,
Please.
wanted to say one thing? Tadviruddha sarvopi dharmaha. When I read that, I felt a bit uneasy, maybe because recognizing swadharma is not as easy as it is said, right? So so
I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure because I mean,
no, I was just trying to say what I thought. I mean, in the sense, suppose someone is not able to recognize their swadharma, They
No,
can,
but no. Hold on. I mean, so what do you mean by recognizing Swadharma?
like we are so much into so many things, and we don't, unless we are that introspective and pay attention to our actions and interests and abilities, we may not be able to pinpoint that this is my Swadharma. So
Well,
awareness of it.
I don't think so, because of the reason that we are conflating the idea of Swadharma with what is my inner interest or my inner ability, capability, etc., etc. But in the Gita's context, or generally, Swadharma is not at the level of recognizing what one's very inner core is, which is like a Atma Vishkarana or Atma Avalokan. That is, as you say, is a very difficult task. And I don't think Krishna or any of the Dharma Shastras, when they say, do your Swadharma, are asking you to introspect or recognize your Swadharma. Recognition is at the level of the Bhashya Varna. So you're born Brahmin, you have to follow the Brahmana principles. You're born Kshatriya, you follow the Kshatriya principle, Dharma. You're born any specific Varna, in the description, in the context of prescribing the Varnashrama Dharma, is not talking at the level of Swabhavika Varna. That Swabhavika Varna is something beyond our reach by default. I mean, the idea is, of course, Acharya talks about the idea of Swabhavika Varna. That is, one has these Swadharmas at the level of Jiva, not only at the level of body. To make the point that if you didn't have them at your very core, what explains anyone getting any sharira? There may be exceptions. So a Brahmana may be born as in a different varna, and I mean, so those do happen. But that is at a conceptual level explaining. The Brahmana may be born a Kshatriya, Vaishya may be born a Shudra, Shudra may be born a Brahmana, but what the final or the current form that the person is in is the defining feature for understanding Swadharma. So because of that, there is no reason to actually do any introspection or an awareness and a recognition activity. What is probably required is, of course, if you say that this is something that needs to be done for many others, I mean, you have to be truthful. You have to be, selfless and with a paropakara mindset. Those are Swadharmas also, because they're not necessarily Vishesha Dharmas. They're not Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra Dharmas, but they are Samanya Dharmas. They have to be done by everyone. And if we are following them correctly or not, are we deceiving ourselves by using some justifications to cover our selfishness, etc.? In those cases, I take your point that it is very, very difficult that we are honest to ourselves and follow the path of Dharma, which is the Samanya Dharma. But when it comes to Swadharma, which is Varnashrama Dharma, it isn't that difficult. But I think the reason or the basis for your question is probably coming from the fact that some interpret Swadharma as not the Jati and the Bhashya Varna defined Dharma, but as something which is internal to one's Jiva, self, soul itself, which is not incorrect. But there is no way we can access that. So if you say that it is very difficult to recognize that, I would say it is actually impossible to recognize that. It is of course difficult, but it is actually not even possible.
So what I was going to say was, at least by praying to God that keep me or keep us on the same, on our, keep us aligned with what we are. I think that should do for us right now.
True. Sure. Okay, so if there are no further questions, we can stop here and we'll
Are
reconvene.
there any translations, in English of Gita Bhashya and Gita Tatparya?
There is one old translation of Gita Bhashya available. I think it's there in archive. I'll fish it out and send a link. For the Bhagavad Gita per se, there is one recent translation published from Purnapramati Samshodhana Mandira and Bhandarkeri Matha jointly. I think it's available for purchase. I can send if it's there on say Flipkart or Madhvacharya, I'll send those links.
Okay.
That's for the Gita Mula only. Of course, in the background, using Shri Raghavendra Tirtha's commentary, which is derived from Gita Bhashya and Gita Tatparya. But directly for Bhashya and Tatparya, there is one, only for Bhashya there is one that I had seen, but I'll see if there are others. Okay, Shri Krishna.
Namaskaram.
Dhanyawad. Namaskar.
Namaskar.